There are around 28 million human trafficking victims worldwide, in every country, in every city. But many people aren't talking about it. Who will speak up to set these captives free? Join us on the Freedom Project, where we talk about ways to fight back against trafficking in our local communities. We are the next generation. We are the change.
Good morning and welcome back to the Freedom Project podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Glendenning, and today we are going to be delving into episode 5, The Hidden Cost, Pornography's Link to Trafficking. Today I am not in my house. I am in a hotel for personal reasons. So if you hear some background noise like siren horns or ambulances going by, I'm in the city, not in my environment. So hopefully we can have that windshield block out some of that noise. I wanted to start off by talking to you guys about pornography's link to trafficking, just by some really fast facts, because before we can really understand why pornography is so important to the world of trafficking and how it exploits individuals, you have to know some basic ground facts about it. So one of them is that every second, 28,258 internet users are viewing pornography. So you have over 20,000 individuals every single second. American children begin viewing pornography at the average age of 11, but that number is decreasing in age as more and more content is popping up. About 67% of young men and 49% of young women believe that viewing pornography is acceptable. The pornography industry is a $97 billion industry worldwide, and unfortunately, with child pornography taking in at least $3 billion. Child pornography is one of the fastest growing online businesses, and 89% of pornography itself comes from the US. There are about 260 new explicit sites that are being put online every single day. 20% of all internet searches are related in some way to pornography, and about 66 to 90% it's estimated of women involved in the production of pornography were sexually abused as children. So we hear all these stats. It's a lot to take in. $3 billion in the child pornography industry, almost 90% of porn coming from the US, a big majority of women who are in pornography were being abused as children. And we think that's really sad, but Kylie, why is this important? And it's because, guys, growing studies are showing that people who are addicted to pornography eventually lose satisfaction with just watching the sexual encounters, and then they seek encounters with trafficked persons. So most pornographic videos contain some kind of depiction of aggression and violence, and then that's being perpetrated in individuals when they're being exploited. And it's estimated from, I know it's a big range, but based on the stats, 40% to 80% of consumers who consume child pornography abuse and molest a child. And typically, even more if we delve into different stats, typically those who molest children, if they molest one, they also have other children that they hurt as well. So we have to acknowledge that pornography is a root cause of human trafficking, and it fuels a demand for more victims of sexual exploitation. And so people who consistently watch porn they are statistically more likely to express an intent to rape others. They're less likely to intervene during a sexual assault. They're more likely to victim blame survivors of sexual assault. They're more likely to support violence against women, or more likely to forward sex without consent. They're also more likely to commit actual acts of sexual violence, and they're more willing to purchase sex. And so I want to be clear, if those who have a history of viewing pornography, if you're like, I would never do that, we're looking at the stats of the majority of people, right? And so we found a study analyzing videos from Pornhub and X videos, and they actually found that 97% of the targets of violence and or aggression were towards women. So we just see it very normalized of being and hurting women in these videos. I kid you not, today I was looking at social media, and there was this article that I saw talking about how younger and younger teens who are getting involved in sexual acts, the women are being choked, and I think they said the age was 12 to 17 are being choked. And you wonder, what the heck, and there's so many things that can go wrong with that. People are not understanding how even to do that, they can cause brain damage to individuals because of the way that they're hurting them. And so, guys, we have this culture that seeks, quote unquote, sexual liberation, but it's at the expense of the lives of thousands of men, women, and children. And so just let me be clear as we go forward in our podcast, right? People who watch pornography aren't quote unquote like bad people, but rather the pornography industry itself is fueling dangerous mindsets and behaviors, and the result of that is exploitation of vulnerable populations. And so anyone who chooses to open their eyes and research, like, even slightly, we're talking about a simple Google search, they're going to learn the obvious fact that there's a definitive link between the porn industry and human trafficking. We have issues when children who are being trafficked are being shown pornography as like sex ed for them, or being told to mimic what they see when they're being forced to sell commercial sex. So I know personally that one of the first ways that I got introduced into the subculture of trafficking, which led me onto a route to advocate for sex trafficking individuals, is when I read a book called Renting Lacey. And it was a narrative story, but that brings you through the process of trafficking and the grooming process and how children get lured into that and get caught up in that. But one of the things was that they had these children watch pornography, like 12 years old, before they're being sold to individuals. And it's because they're showing them what to do. Like, you mimic this, you do whatever they do. And so we see that, being clear as day as children are being groomed through that. And also when women or children are being exploited for the purposes of producing pornographic content. And guys, I'm telling you, a quick Google search, there have been countless survivors sharing their experience that the porn created of them was just recorded rape. And you actually have lots of federal cases that are going on right now with the FBI and some very major executives and head CEOs of porn productions that are being charged with crimes of sex trafficking. And so I have heard time and time again of cases of women being trafficked through like ads that they thought were legitimate, and they came to the production site for the purpose of modeling, of singing, whatever it was. And from there, they were blackmailed, they're forced, threatened, or coerced to film pornography. And if you guys remember, I know we talked about it in a previous episode, sex trafficking is when you have force, fraud, or coercion, or the exploitation of a minor for a commercial sex act, right? If you get anything of value in return for that. And so another issue that we see with the porn industry in relation to trafficking is that there's no consistent regulation of minors being exploited, being like uploaded to major porn sites. And so too many of these videos are being uploaded every day. I know we talked about it like earlier in our stats. There's, 28,000 individuals who watch porn every single second. And so you have so many videos that are popping up every single day. I don't care how many regulations they put in place, nobody is going to be able to filter through all the content that comes in every single day. And as a result, you're having individuals slip through the cracks, and you're having child pornography or child rape being uploaded and people watching this. They just have no way of regulating whether minors are being shown in the content. And so guys, this creates a doorway for traffickers to make money off of minor related pornography. And if you're thinking like, what, Kylie, that doesn't happen, which I don't think you would, but if you are, unfortunately, quote unquote, like barely legal and schoolgirl, schoolboy porn are very common topics that are searched. And which is really gross, because if you actually start researching, going down the rabbit hole and wanting to find out more about it, you have adults, like, yes, they are 18 most of the time, but then again, like I said, with the amount that's being uploaded every day, you really have no way of verifying how old they are. But you'll have them have like Fisher Price toys. And if you're not familiar, those are toddler toys. Like, these are 3 and 4 year old, 2-year-old toys in the background, baby cribs in the background. You have these adult actors who have very like petite bodies, and they're wearing children's clothes. Like, they're not wearing adult clothes. They're wearing like child's clothes. What they would wear. They have very childlike bodies, and they're having like children's hairstyles, like pigtails or little braids, and they're having sex. And the the problem with that is we're perpetuating a culture where people quite literally believe that having sex with a child is hot, or they believe that it's sexy, that it's a turn on, and it's disgusting. And because of that, right, we already discussed how people can only watch that for so long before they have to take a more extreme step. And that's where we're seeing the exploitation, and we're seeing increased rape in children, we're seeing increased molestation in children, right? And so something that I wanted to really talk about, because if you're saying like, well, that's just fantasy, Kylie, people aren't actually acting that out, I wanted to talk about brain chemistry for a second. Because here's the deal. We have to realize that porn is addicting, right? It's an addiction. It can be, and realizing that it can be addicting is a great first step in recovering itself from an unknown porn addiction, right? And so the problem with porn is that when people watch it, they're actually getting this dopamine hit, right? Like the brain chemicals, they're releasing that feel-good feeling, right? But just like addicts, when they're consistently using that time and time and time again, suddenly their dopamine release does not give them that high like they used to feel, right? And so what do, right? They cope with it by turning to something more intense, more exciting, more extreme. And so this in itself, like this process, is how some individuals go from watching like what we would consider like tamer sex scenes into subcultures of porn, like consuming child pornography or bestiality or other disturbing, not okay, non-ethical content, right? This also becomes majorly concerning when the videos themselves are no longer giving consumers a dopamine high, right? So they've just consistently watched it all the time until it just doesn't do it for them anymore. So then they seek out to have and to play out their fantasies in real life. And there are countless testimonies, you guys, I'm telling you, quick Google searches from former trafficked individuals that have been beaten, abused, they've been slapped, spit on, punched like in the face, they've been choked, cut, whipped with belts. The worst that I have ever heard is that a gal was forced to eat her own feces. But where are these people even thinking of this, right? And it's from porn. They've gotten into the subcultures of more extreme, more hardcore, and like child pornography, right? And because of varying men's fantasies, they watched and got inspired from porn, and they're forcing sex trafficked individuals to play that out. And as a result, like, people are being hurt in indescribable ways, emotionally, psychologically, and even sometimes, you guys, this results in death. And so I also wanted to talk about another thing, because I know a lot of pushback for that is, why don't they just say no, right? They can just say no. If these people, they're just prostitutes. Like, they should just say no if they don't want to do it. And obviously they did want to do it because they took the money. And I really wanted to talk about that really quick, right? If you go back, I want to say it's episode 3, we talked about the grooming and psychological manipulation process that goes on to take an individual and really strip them of their self-identity and strip them of their feelings of worthiness and love, and get into this mental, psychological manipulating game with a trafficker where quite literally this trafficker inside, at least mentally, owns them. Like, maybe they're free to walk around, but they are so... like, fear has been instilled in them that they cannot leave for whatever reason. And again, we're talking about force, fraud, or coercion being present in every trafficking case, that they mentally feel like they cannot leave, right? And I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because we talked about having a fear of the trafficker, having a fear of the unknown, and the trauma bond that keeps women stuck. But we can also ask the question, if these girls don't want to be gang raped, right? Because we're talking about things that happen in pornography, right? So if these girls don't want to be gang raped, if they don't want to be punched in the face or kicked in the ribs or brutally choked, why don't they just say no? And I think that more than I could say, I would actually really recommend watching a documentary exposing the porn industry. It's actually called Beyond Fantasy by Magic Lantern Productions. And this is where I first learned a lot about the pornography industry and really like delving into what happens behind the scenes, but we're not told. And it was very enlightening of like the reality and the really sad reality of what's going on there. And so they talk about in one branch of pornography called like hardcore porn, like in one of the episodes, a porn producer openly admitted describing how he would essentially coerce women into more abusive scenes. So he would tell women entertainers as little about the scene as possible so that they would agree to come, right? And then when they arrived, he told them something different, or he changed the scene entirely so that they would be filming something more violent. And if a woman who was filming pornography felt uncomfortable and tried to voice her concerns, the producer would make the intent known that the woman would be blackballed from the industry and no one would hire them again, right? There's so much psychological manipulation that's going on here, right? Like, you're a porn star, no one's ever going to hire you again. If you get blackballed from here, I'm going to make it my personal mission that no one's ever going to hire you. You're never going to show up on a set again. And they are using force and coercion to get women to do these scenes that originally they never wanted to do, right? And for those that watch porn, they don't tell you the aftermath. They don't tell you the aftermath. If you go back and you watch testimonies and you hear people, especially those that have left the industry, because they'll give it to you straight, they don't tell you that these men are, taking shots just so they can get through the scene. They don't tell you that these women are sobbing on bathroom floors after they're done. They don't tell you that this woman that you thought was so, hot, she had to go to the hospital to get stitches from internal injuries that she had from what was being recorded. And the same thing goes for children. This is really hard to hear, but I really do feel like it needs to be said, because this is just like how horrific the porn industry is, and like how it fuels trafficking. Like, I have read articles of how children were being trafficked through pornography, and because they're so little, they're not old enough, they're not big enough to be doing things that are being forced upon them. And they had a doctor who got arrested because he would sew little children back together after they were raped. And he would do it over and over and over again. And it's just so horrific and it's so disgusting. And we have to acknowledge that when we are consuming pornography, we are actively contributing towards this problem of trafficking. Like, we are without realizing it, we're supporting it. We're donating our time, our money, our resources, instead of trying to stop it and advocating for change and helping rescue these children and these women, these men who are caught in this endless cycle of abuse, right? And so, kind of going back to what I was talking about changing the scenes and things, and they would be coerced into it. An example of this would be like a porn performer. They show up to a set only to discover the scene is more aggressive or degrading than they had been told, but they're told by their director or their agent that they have to go through with it or else they'll be blacklisted. Guys, that's force. That legally qualifies as sex trafficking, force, fraud, or coercion. They have been forced at that point. Especially, I'm telling you again, like from testimonies that I've heard, there are like women who have gone through really hard and abusive scenes, and they needed to go to the hospital, calling their agent, telling them that they need to go to the hospital, and their agent tells them, no, you need to go do the next scene, or else we're going to lose out on a lot of money. And these people don't care about them. They're being exploited, especially when we're talking about children. And so, guys, the bottom line is truly that sex trafficking is fueled. It's a root cause of pornography use. Like, consuming pornography aids in the trafficking industry. It's just a part of it. And we can't try to separate it and say, oh, well, there's ethical porn. Like, there's no such thing as ethical porn. Someone is always getting the short end of the stick. Someone is always experiencing psychological trauma and abuse, right? And where we have and we allow this kind of unregulated, because truly that's what it is, however many stipulations and laws you put on it, it will always be in some form unregulated. There are going to be minors and women and children and men who are being abused, and we have to take a stand to that and say, you know what, I care more about these people who are being abused than they care about having sexual pleasure, right? And also understanding, like, very, again, quick Google search, they think it's pleasurable, but they're really ruining their mental health, their future relationships, and like, statistically all across the board, you can't argue it. Like, your risk of developing anxiety, depression, risks of suicide, your divorce rate goes up, your risk of having like long-lasting sustainable relationships goes down. I would recommend listening or researching like Fight the New Drug, they give excellent, stats, and they have all different individuals who are professionals in this industry, on mental health, on relationship advice, counselors, and people who are in politics that talk about pornography and its use and its effect globally and nationally, how it's affecting the U.S. And so if you've been listening to this and maybe you have watched pornography in the past, or you've never watched it at all, or you're struggling in an addiction right now, this is not meant to shame you. This is not meant to make you feel horrible, because you're not a horrible person, but it is meant to expose the porn industry for what it really is, right? It's a front for and a root cause of trafficking. And if we want to advocate for the freedom of individuals, we have to understand and commit to not contributing in this cause, right? We can't close the gate on one side and let this crack in the fence come and all these people are coming through, right? And all these people are getting hurt. We have to completely block it off to help eradicate trafficking. And so if you've been listening to this and you want to learn more about it, more about how trafficking is perpetuated through pornography and through the porn industry, or you just want to learn more about how porn affects your mental health, how it impacts relationships, how it affects trafficking, I would recommend these 3 resources. I would recommend Fight the New Drug. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them probably on Facebook. And I want to say they have their own website, and they will give you all the fast facts, statistics, and testimonials from people who have struggled with a porn addiction and are free or are currently going through it and having coping mechanisms. And I would also encourage listening to their podcast, Consider Before Consuming. The second would be Beyond Fantasy by Magic Lantern. I would recommend watching all 3 parts. I want to say one talks about child pornography, like barely legal porn. The other talks about STDs in the industry, how that affects and really ruins porn stars' lives as they go and they catch diseases, unfortunately, as it's frowned upon to use condoms in the industry. And then the last one would be talking about hardcore pornography and really about force, fraud, and coercion like we're talking about in this episode. I personally would recommend listening to those as a podcast and not watching them. I started by watching them on YouTube, but they're pretty graphic and it can be disturbing. So if you have a queasy stomach, I would consider listening to that as a podcast. And then finally, if you are struggling with pornography use and you want freedom from that and you want to not have that be something that's constantly affecting your life and your relationships, I would recommend going and using the Fortify app. I've heard that that's been a great resource for those who struggle with pornography use, but they want to quit. And it helps you on your phone and blocks and filters ads that could potentially lead you backwards in your progress. And so those are the things that I recommend. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I know that this can be an uncomfortable topic, but really when we talk about it, and we talk about the hidden cost and how it really is affecting and costing people their lives, their whole childhood, their emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, psychological health, that can really be an indicator in an area that we as a society have to work towards to help liberate those that are caught in exploitation and in sexual exploitation. So I just want to thank you for watching or listening, tuning in. If you would like to learn more about how you can help fight back against trafficking in your local community, feel free to follow me on Instagram at The Freedom Project TC for Tri-Cities. That is The Freedom Project TC. And make sure that you hit the notification bell and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode when we upload. I am in the works. I've already got it scheduled out to talk to an advocate who works in an anti-trafficking company. I'm so excited about that. So you guys are going to get insight on what we're doing locally to help combat trafficking and what organizations are doing to help individuals and their resources. So I'm looking forward to that. So go forth, be awesome, be the change. Have a great day.